What's up, everybody? Garrett back here. We got a real cool video for you guys today. I want to talk about, in my opinion, one of the most underappreciated horror franchises of all time. Now, this franchise is one of my all-time favorite horror franchises, and I do believe this is underrated, and I'm talking about the Phantasm franchise.
Phantasm, the delusion of a disordered mind, a phantom, a spirit, a ghost.
Now, Phantasm was a movie introduced to me in my teenage years by my uncle, who introduced me to a lot of horror stuff back then, and he put this thing on a pedestal and said, man, this is one of the all-time best horror movies ever made. And when I put this in for the first time, I couldn't agree more. I think that Phantasm is an absolute masterpiece, and the original movie is just so creepy. It's so different than anything I've ever seen. Now, this was made in 1979. It was written and directed by Don Coscarelli, and this introduces a character, the Tall Man, which was like this malevolent undertaker with superhuman strength. Man, this movie is just, like I said, unlike anything I've ever seen before. It's got horror, it's got sci-fi, it's got fantasy. There's a very dreamlike aspect to Phantasm, and so much that this has a really cool vibe to it. It involves these two brothers and their relationship, Mike and Jody, and his best friend Reggie, who's an ice cream man. So again, it's a real kind of almost starts as like a coming of age kind of story. It's got a real cool vibe to it. Starts kind of slow paced. You start to learn these characters, learn their relationships, and you start bringing in these other elements. Like I said, the Tall Man, who's this undertaker, and there's something very supernatural about him. Now, one of the scenes that really sticks out to me is that scene in the graveyard where they're burying their friend who was murdered. And at the beginning, they're going into the graveyard with all these people holding this casket, this heavy casket with a body in it. Then after the funeral, everybody leaves the gravesite, and Mike, the little boy, stays there. And he's watching this undertaker lift this casket and put it inside the hearse himself. Now, it might not be anything that you notice right away, like, oh, it was no big deal. But then when you think about it, you're like, oh my God, like, this dude just lifted that casket by himself. There's something up with this guy. And that's exactly what Mike witnesses. There's something up with this guy. So he has to go home and tell his brother. Now, again, all hell breaks loose from there. This goes completely bonkers in all these weird directions, but it's something I think if you guys haven't seen it, you need to check this out for the first time. I don't want to spoil everything, but people who have seen this, I'm really curious your thoughts, because in my opinion, this has become a cult classic, but I also don't think that it's talked about as much as it should. Now, the cast of characters that they put together here are super, super effective. Angus Grimm, who played the Tall Man. You got Reggie Bannister, who played Reggie, the ice cream man in this. And like I said, you got Michael Baldwin, who played Mike. And then Bill Thornberry, who played Jody. So again, you have this cool cast of characters here. There's a lot of side characters as well. But man, this is such a great movie. And what's wild about this is this movie was so long that they had to cut so much of this movie out, which really expanded this story, which we will get back to soon. All right, now almost 10 years later is when we finally got the sequel to Phantasm. Now, originally, Don Coscarelli didn't want to do sequels to this movie. He felt like his movie was one and done. The story was over, but Universal really wanted them to spawn a sequel here because horror was really at its peak in 1988. So he was kind of forced into doing this. But what made him really excited about this project is not only was he going to get a lot more money to do this one and make it bigger, badder, better, but he was able to start this exactly with the first one left off. And I really appreciate when movies do that. It really makes it feel like it's part of one big story. So I'm really happy that he was able to do that, because as a fan personally, I love it. But I can understand this didn't get a lot of great reviews at first because people felt a little bit confused, because if they hadn't seen the first one and they went to this one, to have it start right after the other one ends can be a little bit confusing for the viewer. And another reason this didn't do that well is because they had to recast Mike. Now, Universal did like a full casting to try to recast this with more well-known actors. I guess Brad Pitt even auditioned for Mike, which would have been wild if he would have got the role. And Michael Baldwin actually had to audition for his role back and didn't get it. They gave it to James LaGrosse at the time. They thought he was really up and coming, good-looking kid, and they wanted him to play the role of Mike. Now, fans of the original franchise were not happy with this. It kind of stood out as like the black sheep of the Phantasm franchise just due to the fact that it was a different actor who played the main character. Now, like I said before, this, in my opinion, is just as good as the first one. I think this is a fantastic follow-up, even though it came almost 10 years later. Phantasm, the original, is still my favorite, but part 2 is fun as hell. Things get a lot crazier. You start seeing different things happen here with the spheres and this whole world that they're creating. Things get really bonkers, and like I said, it's because they had a lot more money to work with Universal, and I think they really made the best of it. So as much as I do love this sequel, and I think other Phantasm fans really do as well, it didn't do really well in the box office. And even on Rotten Tomatoes, I think it's got like a 4.8 or something like that. But super strong sequel. I think this really is one of those top dogs in the 80s that just, to me, gets overlooked as well. First Phantasm is a cult classic. I think people that know about it love it. But the sequels I don't think get enough love. And that brings us to Phantasm 3. Lord of the Dead, which then was a direct-to-video sequel because of the lack of success Part 2 brought to the table. But man, Part 3 is super fun as well, in my opinion. It takes things a little bit more of an action route, and Don Coscarelli wrote this as well. He really feels strong about this franchise at this point. Like I said, it was a lot more action-based than the other ones. A little less sci-fi, a little more action here. Some people like that, some people don't. They kind of prefer the way it was rather than taking this route of like more action. But you gotta remember, this took place in 1994. This was like 6 years after the sequel, which is even crazier that it's been that long since the original, now that we're on to Part 3. And you get the same cast of characters in here, except this time Michael Baldwin is back as Mike. Now, having Mike back was super, super cool. Him and Reggie are back together. They're on the road. They're trying to find this tall man. Like I said, the effects have gotten better since the first one. You get to see the minions now. You get to see their faces. But this time they introduce a character of a kid. Don Coscarelli wanted to bring a kid into this mix. It was very similar to something like Home Alone with horror. Home Alone was super popular around 1994, so utilizing the success of a movie like that, they brought a little kid who set these traps into the mix. And a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people was like, this is not Phantasm. What is this? I always really liked that. I thought the kid element was really cool. I thought some of his gadgets and traps were really cool. And that is something I love about Phantasm, is I love the creativity with some of these weapons and stuff they have throughout. The hammer with the shotgun shell, the sphere. This kid had the 80s shredder frisbee with razor blades attached to it. So yeah, I really did like Lord of the Dead. I thought this was just a really action-packed version of Phantasm. And I love the story, I love the characters, and to see everybody kind of back here, including Jodie, was really cool. Now, like I said, this was not put out theatrically. I don't know if it was the lack of success from Part 2, but it did do really, really well on VHS when it first came out. It was a success on physical media, which is so cool to see because, again, like I said, when it comes to this franchise, I still think Part 3 is really, really strong sequel, and it definitely helps to have the cast of characters back. Even like I said, Jodie is back, but he's in more of a different form, I would say. But you guys definitely have to check out Part 3 if you haven't. Now, as we roll on to Part 4, Phantasm Oblivion, this one is a really unique sequel that I just love. It's basically a road movie. Like, these guys are on the road. They're in the CUDA, which is another huge aspect of this franchise that I didn't bring up. The CUDA car is another huge character in this franchise. Man, that thing is sick. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. But guys, Phantasm 4, like I talked about when I talked about the original Phantasm was such a long movie. They had to cut so much from that movie. And what was nice is when Phantasm 4 came, it almost had a little bit of a prequel element to it because they used a lot of the footage that they had to cut from the original Phantasm and put it inside this movie. I absolutely loved that because you feel like you're watching Part 1, but all these scenes that you've never seen before that are coming on the screen is just absolutely mind-blowing. It's like, oh my God, like, did they prepare for 4 sequels that they were going to show us this? It's just really cool how they intersplice them together. It makes the experience really awesome. It makes it feel like you're watching like an alternate timeline of what was going on in Part 1 that maybe we just didn't see. I love Phantasm Oblivion. It's very, very basic. Like I said, they use a lot of old footage. A lot of it's on the road. Then he goes back in time and kind of learns a little bit about the tall man and what the tall man was like before he became the supernatural element he is. So with Phantasm 4, you get all the cast of characters back. which makes this a fun ride. Like I said, we're already in 1998 when this came out. So man, this is like 20 years since the original one, and we've only on number 4. So a lot of space between these movies, and it's so cool to see all these characters that come back for each one of these movies, no matter how much time has passed. Now, speaking of time past, we're going to get into the last installment of the franchise's series. And that's going to be Phantasm Ravager, aka Phantasm 5. Now, this came out in 2016. Now, there was talks about a Phantasm 5 for a long time. There was all different stories of what they wanted to do with these characters. Don Coscarelli said he had a whole story written for these characters, but it just never ended up coming in fruition. Now, again, it took such a long time for this movie to come out. There was so many people that wanted to be involved in the franchise's series to come out with this Part 5. There was scripts all over the place. Even Don Coscarelli said that he pitched one to New Line to release theatrically in 2005. Now, finally, this thing was released in 2016. Most of it takes place in a CGI planet where you kind of learn where the Tall Man's from. The Red Planet with his minions and stuff like that. And you get the cast of characters back. You get Reggie, Jody, Mike. They're all here again in 2016 to fight off Angus Grimm, the Tall Man, who was also in this in a limited role. I mean, at this point, he was like 89 years old or 88 years old when they did this. And it's crazy to see him back in that role again. So to see everybody back together in 2016 when this was released was super cool. I mean, like I said, unfortunately, this felt like a very made for sci-fi type of finale to this franchise. This is probably not the way Don Coscarelli wanted it to go out, but there was not a lot of time left if they wanted Angus to be really involved here. So Ravager was the final installment of the Phantasm franchise. And like I said, there's only 5 movies, which spans from 1979 all the way to 2016, which is insane to think about. But I think this is a really solid franchise that tells a story from front to back. So, I mean, if you want to learn this whole story, you got to watch all of these things and go on the journey with these characters. Like I said, we get the same cast of characters pretty much from the first one all the way to the last one. So this story is one that I think everybody who loves horror movies should definitely enjoy. Now, again, we're not done yet. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of this franchise. I'm not just doing this video just to do it. I love this franchise, and I talk about this franchise all the time with people. I wish it did get more love and was more appreciated, I think, in the horror world. I mean, a lot of people know it, but it doesn't get the same love as things like Halloween, Scream, Friday the 13th, Elm Street, Child's Play. Like, it doesn't fall in that same category as these big franchises. But to me, I feel pound for pound, this should definitely be in talks of one of the greatest horror franchises of all time. Now, with that being said, I wanted to showcase some physical media editions I have, props I have from this movie, collectibles I have. Phantasm does not have a lot of collectibles. It's just a franchise that they don't really do much with. But when it comes to physical media stuff, I have one VHS tape. I would love to get the original Phantasm VHS tape. It's on my to-do list, but I do have Phantasm 2 on VHS. For a while, this was the hardest one to find. It didn't have a DVD until way later, but it took a while for Phantasm 2 to kind of hit physical media when it came to DVD and stuff like that. So Phantasm 2 is the only one that I have here on VHS. I would love to get the other ones as well. Now, speaking of DVD, the first release of Phantasm was an MGM DVD, which I do have. Unfortunately, it is boxed away, but man, this is the one that I remember. It's got that cool image of the Tall Man on the front with that orange background. MGM put it out. Absolutely loved that edition. But then Anchor Bay acquired the Phantasm franchise and gave us a lot nicer editions. Now, Anchor Bay gave us part 1 with a slipcover. Now, it's a real cool edition. It had some special features that we hadn't seen before. But the edition I have here, which I did do a video on, is this Circuit City edition. Now, the reason this was special is if you look at that sticker right there, it says exclusive Phantasm poster inside, 1 of 7 signed by Don Coscarelli. Man, this was such a big deal because, again, this was a signed Don Coscarelli autograph inside this, and it was limited to Circuit City. So this was a grail that I recently acquired that I've been after for such a long time, and it really had to do with this slipcover with the sticker. This, unfortunately, was not signed by Coscarelli, but the memories and physical media history is here with this one, especially with that Circuit City sticker, because obviously we know Circuit City is no longer around, so it's a real cool memory to kind of bring up when it comes to Phantasm. Now, since I did that video talking about that Circuit City signed edition, I had a viewer of the channel send me this, and he got this directly from Anchor Bay themselves, and very wild. And that is a sealed copy of Phantasm from Anchor Bay, but this one is actually signed by Don Coscarelli. So very cool to have these two in my collection. Like I said, I've got the Circuit City exclusive, and then the same one, which wasn't the Circuit City exclusive, but this one actually is signed by Don Coscarelli. So super cool to have these in my collection. And they followed that up with Phantasm 3 from Anchor Bay, which is a cool one. Unfortunately, this didn't have a slipcover or anything like that. But again, very cool addition they did here. Some new special features. This is part of like that second wave of Anchor Bay where they started getting newer titles and putting newer artwork on them. So yeah, Phantasm 3. And the last one they did was Phantasm 4 Oblivion. I actually have 2 copies of this, one sealed, one not. This was a cool addition. This did have an MGM release as well. So part 1 and 4 had an MGM release, but this got some new features. It was upgraded a little bit. So Phantasm 4 was a real cool addition to the Anchor Bay library. Now again, at this point, Phantasm 2 was still not available, so I was kind of missing Phantasm 2. But Anchor Bay in the UK was able to get Phantasm 2 in an edition that was sought after by all horror collectors. I remember having to go on either Amazon UK or eBay UK or something back in the day to acquire this, and it's remained one of my favorite items in my physical media collection. And that is the Phantasm Sphere box set. It's got all of these in there. Now again, this is an Anchor Bay UK item, which does remain a holy grail in my collection all these years later, but this was super special because this was the only way you could get Phantasm 2 on disc for quite a while. So that was a huge deal back then. I don't know if anybody out there that's watching this had that edition, but it was so sought after for so long, and it does remain one of my favorite items in my collection. Now, when it comes to things like Laserdiscs, I never collected them, so I'm sure these all have Laserdiscs as well, but I don't own any of them. And finally, Part 2 did see the light of day on DVD, but it was from Universal, not from Anchor Bay, and that was this Phantasm 2, kind of a very bare bones edition. Basically, it was like, you want it, here it is type of thing. So finally had Phantasm 2 in the collection here in the US, so a lot of fans were happy that or wasn't running region free. So speaking of Phantasm 2, it was so sought after for so long, but when a company Scream Factory was announced, one of their first editions was Phantasm 2 in a beautiful Blu-ray with a ton of special features on here. They really did really good things to this movie here. And like I said, since this release, it has really become a cult favorite in the franchise. For a while, it was, like I said, the black sheep. It wasn't available on DVD with the rest of them. It didn't have the original mic in there, so it always felt like it was a little bit of the oddball of the bunch. But once they released this edition, Scream Factory did, this movie got a whole new fan base, and I think it's been a favorite ever since. Now, from there, Phantasm had a lot of other editions. I know there was a Sphere box set from Arrow, which is really cool. I did not get that. It also had another Sphere set, I believe, here in the States, but I ended up getting this Well Go USA box set. I really do like this, and it's become very valuable. You can see Tall Man on the front here. Very valuable set it's become through the years, but you get all the films. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you get a book, and you get a nice making of documentary. So again, this Phantasm right here, this was actually a really, really like 4K remastered for this edition. Bad Robot did it. And J.J. Abrams, who is a huge fan of this movie, such a big fan that when he made Star Wars, he actually had a character, and that was a real nod to Phantasm. And I actually have the figure. I couldn't find it to bring it out, but it's a stormtrooper that's like silver, and it has to represent the sphere. So very, very cool. I think it was like Phasma or something like that. But I'll showcase a picture of that figure. Again, the nod to Phantasm was something I absolutely loved. Now, he did a great job on this restoration. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. When I saw this restoration, it felt like I was watching this movie for the first time. So guys, if you do not own this movie, I suggest to try to find the remastered version that Bad Robot and Abrams did. It looks unbelievable, but we will see that further as we keep going here. And you end up getting part 2, like I said, which is amazing. The ball is back. That's the original poster art. Love that. Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead on Blu-ray. Phantasm 4, Oblivion on Blu-ray. And And then Phantasm 5 Ravager. So again, all come in this beautiful set together. I love when these movies are individual, but inside a nice box set. Very, very cool. And like I said, this does come with a book as well. So, man, it's got a poster in here. It's got a book in here. Now, since then, they did come out with a 2-pack. This was kind of a random well-go 2-pack of Phantasm 1 and 2. I bought this only because this did have, for the first time ever, the unrated Part 2 cut, or the director's cut of Part 2 in here. So you get an upgraded look at this. It comes with work print scenes. So Part 2 on this one was different than what we got in this box set, what we got from Screen Factories. That was the reason I bought it. That was kind of the kicker on this random Part 1 and 2 set here. Do I think that you need that? No, I think we're going to get something better in the future from that movie. But if you can get it cheap, it's probably the best way to watch Part 2. But last but not least, I ended up getting this media book. I think this is from Germany, I think. And this is a 4K of Phantasm. So finally, Phantasm got a little 4K treatment in this beautiful, beautiful edition here. Now, check this out. Boom. You've got this book in here. So it's media book. Amazing, amazing stuff. So yeah, so this one I think kind of came and went. I don't know how readily available this is, but this is the German 4K media book. I love this image on the front too. I think that's really, really cool. Very dreamlike, which represents the movie really well. So again, that's the history of Phantasm on physical media. Like I said, I didn't own any Laserdiscs, so I'm sure it probably has some. I don't have all the VHS, but I do have a lot of what it's come out with on DVD and Blu-ray and stuff like that. And I'm hoping that this is not the end. I think that we're still going to get a 4K box set of all these movies. But now when it comes to other things Phantasm, I've got original one-sheets of Part 1 and 2, signed by Don Coscarelli. I've got another one-sheet of the remastered version when they put it back out in theaters. And I do have this print from Mondo that I will give full props to Wes over at Dead Pit. He got this signed by the whole cast for me at a convention. Very, very cool of him to do for me. This was kind of when we first met each other. He did this for me because he knew how much of a big fan I was, and the cast was all at a convention he was at. So he got that signed by pretty much the whole cast there, which remains one of my favorite prints in my collection. That's leading into my gym here at the house, that print. But yeah, very, very cool. Like I said, I do have a lot of posters and stuff when it comes to Phantasm and the representation of that movie. And when it comes to other physical media type things, I mean, I do have the original score soundtrack from Mondo that they did for the film. I did show you props, like I showed you that Shredder Frisbee. Now, this is the original Shredder Frisbee, like from the 80s, which they took this Frisbee and they added blades around it for Part 3, which I always thought was really neat. So, of course, I had to go back and find the original Shredder that they used to create that weapon, which, again, that thing screams 80s, that hot pink. I love it. This is a cool little box prop that I have. If you guys had seen the first one, you know what's in here or what's supposed to be in here. But this is pretty damn cool, too. One of the coolest things in my collection, I don't want to break it, but I do have this real cool sphere in a glass case. I think I showcase it a little bit more in my room tour video if you guys haven't seen it, but I'll take it out really quick and show you. But this thing, like, literally could kill somebody. Like, this thing is insane. Like, this ball is heavy, these blades are sharp, this screw is sharp. Like, this, if I threw this at somebody, it could probably kill them. But unbelievable piece displayed in this glass case. Very, very cool. I've had this for quite a while. I don't remember exactly who did this, but this remains one of my favorite items in my collection. It's proudly displayed in my movie room along with this die-cast CUDA, which is actually on the license plate. It says Phantasm. This is exact replica of the car from the movie. Now, I got this a while back, and it came in a box that said Phantasm, all this stuff. Well, come to find out, Don Coscarelli was actually pretty pissed about this, and that's why this item is now super rare and valuable, because this was not licensed as a Phantasm product, but the company released it with the logos and everything, and I guess he must have had it pulled off the shelf or something. But that goes for big money, that CUDA there. And I have that displayed proudly in a glass case in my collection as well. So I'm happy to have jumped on that right away when I saw it, because I didn't realize that that thing was almost like an illegal edition, basically. But those are a lot of little props and stuff that I have from the film. I'm sure I'm probably missing something. I'm thinking, like, did I bring everything to the table? I do have this. Now, NECA came out with this figure for the Tall Man back in the day. Absolutely love it. Unfortunately, like, this is the only figure that he's ever had. And it comes with a little minion, aka Jawa, which is super interesting too, because this came out before Star Wars. So people always see that and they're like, oh, they're just like Jawas. At the correlation between those two movies. And then what I talked about before with Phantasmo, whatever that character is that was created because of Phantasm later down the road with J.J. Abrams. Super interesting to have these two movies kind of connect in those weird ways. But you get the little minion there. You get the Tall Man. You get that display. I love this thing. This is another piece that is super valuable now. And another thing that's come out recently, which I had to get because, like I said, Phantasm doesn't get a lot of love. And that is the Tall Man Funko Pop. So Angus Grimm got a Funko Pop after he passed away. But man, this is so rad. I mean, I had to get this thing just to represent this movie that I love so much that, like I said, does not get a lot of love. And recently, Trick or Treat Studios did get a license for Phantasm, which was really cool to see. They have a mask of the Tall Man, and they have a mask of the minions. I absolutely love it. I'm going to get those masks and add them to my collection. But last time I checked, they were sold out. So I will have those, and I'm going after those VHS tapes as well. But guys, we talked a lot of Phantasm tonight. I hope this helps you guys go back and rewatch this franchise. Not just the first one, but all of them. Especially 2, 3, and 4, man. I think that they are such strong sequels to a story that the first one really built for us. And for a movie to kind of have that many good sequels that tells this story with the same characters when Phantasm was only supposed to be one movie is really, really awesome. Because a lot of these sequels that come out, they don't connect, right? They're just kind of like different kids, different camp, different school. It's always like the sequels, but this sequel actually connects the same characters all the way through, which I really, really do appreciate that long-term storytelling. But guys, I wanted to talk about Phantasm. It's one of my favorites, and I do think it is so underappreciated. So let me know down below, are you a Phantasm fan? Because I can see this movie not working for everybody, but there's something about this movie and this vibe and the tone that I absolutely love. And if you are a big fan of Phantasm, let me know down below. And if you're like, you know what, this video made me want to check this franchise out. I've never seen the sequels, or this video made me want to rewatch the sequels. I haven't seen them in a long time. That's what I want to do with this video. I want to create discovery or rediscovery of this awesome horror franchise. Now, gang, thank you for checking this out. If you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, and comment down below because I have another horror franchise to talk about that I think is the most overlooked horror franchise of all time. Now, thank you for checking this out. This is Garrett at Born2beRad, and like always, stay rad.